Welcome to the Packaging Therapist Podcast, the show where we discuss technical packaging problems so that you can solve them for your business. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Packaging Therapist. Today I am joined by Jennifer Barta. Jennifer Barta is a fractional R&D professional with extensive experience in both product and packaging development. She has spent over 30 years in the CPG industry and is currently a fractional CEO at FINNOVATION Lab. This is the home for startups to find fractional support as they grow their businesses. Thanks for being here today, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay. So we all want to save money. We all want to do things more efficiently. And in the CPG industry, we have tons of cartons. And so today we're going to discuss ways that you can think about optimizing carton sizes for your business. Jennifer just spent the last few months doing a project just like this. So we're going to talk about real life experience as well as the process to go through as you evaluate options for saving money on cartons for your business. So we typically approach projects with a few different phases. We have discovery. Does this make sense? Can we do it? Feasibility. What types of calculations do we need to make to prove that it should be something we move forward with? Then development, we actually start digging into creating a space for the project to exist and to test it and to figure out kind of the details. And then implementation is, okay, now we're going to make the change. It makes sense. We've done the preliminary testing. Everybody's on board. The test for implementing that carton size change is the fourth phase. So let's start with discovery. We'll walk through each of the phases. This will give you an idea of sort of the project flow. And let's get right into it. Okay, so in the discovery phase, Jennifer talked to us a little bit about what the phase looks like, things to consider, key business partners, just get into it.
Yeah, so in the discovery phase, it's really about what is the team trying to accomplish, right? So in some cases, it's truly just about saving money and going after fewer carton sizes and consolidating. In other cases, it's about continuity on shelf. It's about making sure that visually the products, fit with their competitive set. So depending upon what your goals are, very different people will be involved. But I would say the discovery phase almost always involves the business team talking about what the goals are for the project, the operations team talking about, hey, what's working for us at the manufacturing facility, what's not working for us. Sourcing, we work very closely with them to find out who are our key suppliers, who do we really want to be working with? Are we going to stay with our current suppliers? Are we going to change those? Our logistics distribution teams talking about, hey, what kind of changes are acceptable? Can we fix any issues that we currently have, make things better? The business team, like I mentioned before, sales and marketing, and really talking about what the needs are. What are we hearing from our customers and consumers, and what kind of changes do we want to incorporate as long as we're going through and having changes to the carton? And then I would say, don't forget the fact that if we change the carton, it's not the only thing that's going to have to change. There's probably other components. So inside the carton, what is inside? Is there a tray? Is there a film involved that's containing the product and protecting it? And then think outside the carton. Is there a case involved? Most likely there is. What flexibility changes do we have the ability to make there as well? And so I would say, the discovery phase is really about talking to everybody that you think has an opinion or, opinion about what it should look like or an opinion about how it should run and be a part of the manufacturing. And then even thinking beyond that particular carton and that business, how does it fit with the competitive set? And so all of those things are really, really important in the discovery phase. And it can take quite a while to talk to everybody, get input. And it never fails that the first time you talk to them, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, change is fine. And then the second time you talk to them, they open up a little bit more and say, oh, so if you're really changing this, then make sure that we don't perpetuate this issue that we currently have. Let's make sure that we make it better. And so I would say, you think talking to each group and each stakeholder wants in the discovery phase is enough, but often it takes more than one conversation. And to, repeat, so you get feedback from one area and you're like, oh, no, that's going to affect sales. So now I got to go back and talk to sales. And so then open up the conversation again and let them tell you more than they did last time. And so the discovery phase is really important.
Do you find yourself having one-off conversations with all the key business partners, or is this a time when you start having team calls? Like if the project seems large enough where it could make a big impact to the business, do you start team calls where everyone can kind of weigh in, or do you
Yeah,
go kind of one-off?
yeah, I did both, or I do both. So I would say definitely one-on-one conversations are very, very important because you don't want to drag everybody else. I mean, this is a lot of time spent. And so one-on-one
Yeah,
conversations are incredibly important to save time for other people. But absolutely team meetings to say, okay, so here's where we're at here. Here's the impact that we're finding this change is going to have on manufacturing. So business, finance, operations, let's have a conversation. Let's figure this out because something's going to have to give. And so
yeah,
often, when you're working also with multiple operations organizations, right? So consider a line of products that has multiple contract manufacturing locations. It might be under one company, but there's still 2 or 3 or 4 different manufacturing facilities, and
sure.
they all have different interests. And so it ends up being the case where you cannot make everybody happy. And so, in order to highlight that for some groups, you get them together in a room and go through it and say, okay, plant A, you can't run anything smaller than this. Plant B, you can't run anything larger than this. Therefore, this is like the actual window we have. If we're going to consolidate, it has to be in this space. And then everybody starts to realize it. And it gets to be easier to make, you know, easier to negotiate,
Sure.
easier to make adjustments, easier for people
Yeah,
to accept the fact that they're not going to get exactly what they want.
sure. And in this instance where we're consolidating cartons, um, this opportunity can apply to a few different situations. For example, if there's been like a merger or an acquisition, you've kind of inherited some complexities.
Yeah.
And so that's a great time to kind of step back and say, okay, what can we do here? And then taking a look at your supplier set. And of course, if you're running the same thing many times, that's going to be typically less expensive. And then you think about changeovers and you think about just simplifying just all the processes, right?
Right.
And I think it's also really important to point out that this is what a packaging engineer does.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of times people leveraging their suppliers for insights into maybe what they could do, but unless you really have someone in your organization doing the technical project management on top of the packaging engineering, there's a lot of places where this can fall off the rails and cause a lot of problems. So that's what an engineer can bring to the project. I just wanted to kind of point that out. Okay, so we've done the discovery phase. We've had our conversations. This seems like a great opportunity to save money and create efficiencies. So we're gonna move forward into the feasibility stage. And this is kind of if I do this, then what happens, and is that okay, right? So kind of continuing the conversation and thinking of it in more of like a change management standpoint. So can you walk us through feasibility phase?
Yeah. And so if you're going to make a consolidated carton that you're hoping to work across multiple products and multiple manufacturing facilities, are you going to have to change the amount of product in the carton to get to one? So let's say you have one product right now that is in a larger carton, one's in a smaller carton. If you're trying to get to one single carton, is it even possible to get that amount of product into the same carton in both instances? And so, you've got to go through all of those calculations. Again, is there a tray on the inside? Is there a U board? What is going inside, and what impact does that have to that
Mm-hmm.
particular material? And can that change be made? I would say that most likely the changes to the carton are going to absolutely impact changes to the other components inside the carton, very, very likely. And so making sure that those are all acceptable, all the stakeholders, again, reviewing it with them. And then from an equipment standpoint, so can the equipment in plant A and plant B run the carton, as we discussed earlier? And then what impact does that have down the line? And so if you're changing a carton, you're absolutely going to have to change the corrugated container, and that absolutely is going to change the pallet. And so sometimes you find the perfect carton that you really like and it works for the products, and then you play that out all the way to the pallet and it's ugly and it's not where you want to
Yeah.
go, and you don't want to go there. And so then you have to go back to the carton again. And what dimension do I need to change in order to make sure that we don't get ourselves into an ugly pallet? And so
Yeah.
it's,
Absolutely.
you're looking really, really close at the carton, but you got to make sure you're taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think that's part of understanding how a project like this works, right? So you think you're working with all the key stakeholders, and they all have a little bit different in terms of like what the ask is or what their limits are that they're willing to consider. And so a lot of the development phase is kind of that back and forth, right?
Yep.
So you get to the point where you have a palette and that works for sales and marketing. It's got the face panel they want, but then all of a sudden you're like, wow, you're 60% for palette utilization. And you're like, that's never going to work. And so then you kind of have to iterate again, which can be kind of frustrating, but it is definitely part of the process. And you have to present different options to the team, because certainly you don't want to double your logistics costs just to get a face panel that you want, right? Nobody wants
No.
to do that.
Yep. Absolutely.
But the key stakeholders don't understand how each of their asks are really developing this result, right? Because everyone has a little bit different opinion or need for what the product looks like. So it's a lot of back and forth in the development phase, or in the feasibility phase. So
Yeah, definitely. And so I would say it's frustrating, but also, I personally look at it as a challenge, and I find it to be just this overwhelmingly satisfying feeling when you get it right and you're able to find, like,
yeah.
you know, not always, but often there is a solution that works across the board, maybe with
Hmm.
some slight consolidations, but and making some changes that, in some cases you wish you didn't have to make, but there's still there's a solution in most cases, and so that I find that to be super fun and exciting.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. That's why I love being a
That's
packaging
that's why
engineer.
yeah, that's why we're packaging engineers.
Love helping, right? Cool. Okay, that's a good summary of the feasibility phase. And then next is more of the development phase. So that's when you're getting maybe product samples and you're kind of really working on the details of the actual solution you believe is going to work.
Yeah, and so this is a really important part of the process. And so this is where you get actual physical samples, send them, and they're usually just, a handful, but send them out to all the important stakeholders. Marketing needs to touch and feel them. The plant needs to touch and feel them. Bring them out to the line. Think about, okay, so if this change is made, will it run? And so this is a very important part. Everybody needs to have them. There's nothing like a physical sample. You think sending the information in a document that describes the dimensions, or a drawing that has the very, very specific dimensions is enough, but it just really isn't. Making sure that everybody has a chance to touch, feel, to set the, marketing wants to set the carton against the competition. How does it look?
Yeah.
Do we appear to be the better value on shelf based on size? Sales is going to want to, also touch and feel them, because they're going to be the one out and trying to sell it into the customers. And so it's just really, the development phase is really important. I'd say the highlight of that phase is the actual physical samples, and it doesn't have to be hundreds. It's just a few. Um, and
Okay. And do you feel like the plant could use unprinted samples, and then you could get digital
absolutely.
samples, like printed samples for sales and marketing, right?
Yep.
And then if there do you ever see a need to do sales samples in this phase, or is that typically part of new product development only?
I think it depends on your timeline, and I think it depends
Okay.
on your what kind of change you're making, right? So um, if it's that big of a change that it really is going to impact the shelf, then absolutely you need sales samples. You need to get them out to your customers. If you're talking about a very minor change, then I would say it's entirely possible to get by without doing
Sure.
sales samples. And it
Sure.
really,
Yeah. If you're,
yeah, it really depends on your customers. Do they want to see sales samples in every single case? Some of them do. You just don't have a choice. It's like you want to tell them, oh,
yeah.
it's a really minor change. Well, no, they want to see them. And so um, I, either it happens here or in the next phase, the implementation phase. I think it really depends on your timeline and how fast you're trying to move.
Sure, that makes sense. And then, like you said earlier, the complexity of the change. So, if it's a complete brand refresh, then you're probably maybe you'll be more likely to do sales samples so people can see. Um, and it does make sense to mention too that this is a like if you're going to do a brand refresh or you need to change and get new plates, this is a great time to look at a consolidation project and just kind of look overall at the structures you're currently in. Because if you already have to buy new plates, you may as well incorporate the correct size that project as well, you know?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And if you have a brand that has been using the same basic carton dimension and style for a long time, there are new carton flap styles that save you
sure.
money, like a economy flap versus a full flap. There are brands out there that are still using, die lines that they've used for many, many years because it is very expensive to change. And so I
Yeah.
agree. When you're making a branding change is a great time to say, hey, how many different ways can we save money when I look at this carton?
Yeah, that
And
makes
so
sense. Cool. So that's development. And then after the development phase is the implementation phase, where we agree that the change is going to be made. We order production materials. We run the material. Walk us through implementation a little bit.
yeah, and so the implementation phase looks very different depending upon the um, sophistication of the manufacturer, right? So are they running are they running carton flaps that will be sites and glued on site, and you know or are they using pre-glued and they will just be erecting the cartons with product insertion? And so it really depends on what kind of equipment the manufacturer has will really impact the implementation phase. Also, are your cartons hand packed or are they machine inserted? How complex is the insertion process? Is there a tray involved? Is there is it a bag and box? And so,
Mm-hmm.
the size of the trialing and how complicated it is really is that negotiation and conversation with your operations team to make sure that whatever the key concerns are, whatever the current issues are, we don't want to perpetuate that with the change. We want to make it better. And so you can take all of that input into consideration, design a trial that can make sure that you are addressing the current manufacturing issues and getting rid of them and confirming that before you make a go. Or sometimes you find out you didn't make it better. You thought you did, but you didn't. And so making sure that you're running long enough in order to make an accurate assessment of that
Sure.
particular change and the issue. So if the plant sees an issue every couple of weeks, you're like, well, that's going to be really difficult to test because you're not going to run a trial to
Right.
like white cartons, let's say, for weeks. But the whatever the issue is, pushing the boundaries in on that particular equipment, the settings, um, variation. Maybe you can ask your carton manufacturer to, send you some slight variations in carton size and just see what impact that has.
Sure.
You know,
If that can
pushing to
improve
make
it.
sure that you are testing the area that you're seeing an issue today because you want to make it better. That's a great way to save money. The better things
Yeah.
run, the less waste there is, the less overuse there is, and especially if you're working with a contract manufacturer, um, their toll rate will go down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note you mentioned better than before, which implies that the manufacturing facility knows what their throughput is now, knows some of the key metrics of production. And so that's something to keep in mind that you ask about so that when you're making a change, sometimes they have a tendency to be really scrupulous when they see a change, like, oh, and kind of looking for mistakes or looking for reasons this opportunity or this option isn't as good as what you used to have. And so if you have some of that baseline data on how the previous packaging ran, then you can kind of use data driven
Yes.
decision making around the change versus, well, I feel like this doesn't run as well. Because that can be impossible to kind of solve that feeling, right? It's around, okay, well, what are the numbers? So kind of if you have to in the beginning, get some baseline data somehow, even if you have to go to the line and collect it because it doesn't exist right now, that's going to be an important piece to getting the project across the finish line.
Absolutely. Data is always helpful. Um, and
Yeah.
some manufacturing facilities have it, some don't, but you always can get the data. You
Right.
have to spend
Yeah. It
time.
might just take a little bit more
Yep.
time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, cool. Do you have anything to add that we missed as we were kind of walking through this?
I can't think of anything. It's a pretty comprehensive look at what it takes to change a carton.
Yeah. So we talked through the 4 phases: discovery, feasibility, development, and implementation. They each have distinct needs at each phase. And the idea is to bring the whole business along as you make a change so that everyone's in agreement and the change is the best for the business, right? And yeah, there you have it. It's a simple summary of how to make a carton change. In the next episode, we'll be talking about how to consolidate case sizes. So some cases have cartons, other cases have pouches. So tune into that episode. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.